Let me start by asking you to use your imagination just for a couple of seconds. Now, not everybody likes all the same things, and if you're not a big outdoor person, you have to imagine you're doing this indoors, okay? But imagine you're at a picnic, okay? So you've got your favorite food, you have your chicken, you got your salad, you got your fruit trays, you got some really good Dorothy-made desserts going on. I mean, that just made the picnic right there. You're spread out in a beautiful area, grassy field, and you got the water, a little river running by. The weather is just perfect. Everything is beautiful. And you have your proverbial red and white checkered tablecloth spread out on the grass. It's just like picture perfect kind of thing. You're feeling good, right? For the most part, unless you have some major allergies, and then that could be an issue. But for the most part, you're having a good time. I want you to kind of keep that positive picture in your mind, just to kind of in the back of your mind. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But we are wrapping up part 3 of this, we are in part 3 of this series, What Extraordinary People Think. And we're looking at the importance of our thoughts and the importance of being thoughtful in our thinking. So we've been using a verse from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. You can finish it for me. Be careful what you think, because your thoughts run your life. That is right. So we're using some great ancient advice from the Apostle Paul, who wrote a letter in the 1st century to a church in the city of Philippi. And so in this advice, we're learning how to think like extraordinary people. So Paul wrote this advice to some believers, some followers of Jesus, while he himself was in prison. And he's in prison for preaching or teaching about Jesus. So he's trying to tell people about Jesus, that he is the Son of God, and that he's worthy to be worshipped and served. And he's also saying that he's worthy to suffer for. So he is that great, that his cause is that great, that he's even worthy to suffer for the sake of Jesus. And so Paul's in prison for exactly that, and he's encouraging these followers of Jesus to basically be prepared to do the same, that Jesus is worth following, and he's trying to encourage them and help them in the face of possible persecution or opposition, possibly the threat of prison or even death himself as he is in prison writing this. But whether you are a follower of Jesus or not, the advice that we find in this ancient letter of Paul is good, sound, solid advice. And it's transformational advice as well for how you see yourself, for how you see others, and for how you see the world around you. And they're working on that. Sure. Get me back in a second. So whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, this is good advice, and this is advice worth taking to heart. And hopefully you'll find some really good nuggets in it, wherever you are in your faith journey today. So here's Paul's advice. It's found in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. It says, finally, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure. Thank you, Brian.
Whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So that's our ancient advice from Paul. So we've been looking briefly at some of the science of the brain over the past couple of weeks. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a recap, a summary of some of the things that we've been looking at from the science of the brain. So in the first week, in part 1, we talked about this small area of the brain called the limbic system. If you were here, you know a little bit about that. And if you weren't here, you can hear more about it if you go to our YouTube channel and check out the message there. But this little area of our brain, very small but very important, helps regulate our emotions and our motivation. And we get this information from Dr. Daniel Amen. So here's what the limbic system does, very briefly. It stores highly charged emotional memories. It influences our motivation and our drive. It influences bonding and social connectedness. It controls sleep and appetite patterns. And it processes our sense of smell. So this one little area of the brain handles a whole lot of things. And if you kind of look at how those things are interconnected, it's really quite an incredible thing. Something as simple as a smell being connected to or triggering a particular memory that you have is very interesting. Our thoughts are powerful and influential. And just one little area of the brain demonstrates just how incredible our brains really are. In part 2, we talked about ants. And ants are automatic negative thoughts, also from Dr. Daniel Amen. He says that there are certain ants that are a little more common, and he gives us some example of those. But these ants, these automatic negative thoughts are, of course, automatic. They're habitual. They're involuntary. They're the kind of thoughts that just habitually happen. We don't even have to really do anything extra. They're just kind of there when something happens because they're habitual. They're automatic. They're negative, meaning they're not hopeful. They're not helpful. They're kind of either critical or self-condemning type of thoughts. And these thoughts are limiting. These thoughts limit or hinder the way that we look at ourselves, the way that we look at other people, the way we look at our circumstances. So these thoughts keep us kind of trapped in one way of seeing things. And again, this is all happening in our minds and in the way that we process things. So here are some of the ants, if you recall from last week, and I was asking you if you can kind of think of which ones might resonate with you and stand out with you. I'm sure one or two or more would do that. So we have thoughts that are always never thinking. That's when you say things like, I never get ahead, or I'll always be like this, or we say that about someone else. You always do that. And we kind of limit and kind of box them in. We have mind-reading thoughts, thoughts where we assume we know what the other person is going to say before they say it. And so we don't even give them a chance to really say what they're thinking. We read their mind for them. We have fortune-telling thoughts where we often anticipate the worst-case scenario. And so as we look ahead at a particular situation, our thoughts kind of cause us to come to a conclusion about something beforehand. And it's often what we call self-fulfilling prophecy. The little kid riding the bicycle, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree. Sure enough, they hit the tree because that's what they're so focused on, trying to avoid it. And so we have some of those kinds of thoughts. We have negative thoughts. Sometimes we just tend to focus on the negative more than on the positive. These ants that go through our minds. We have thinking with our feelings. Sometimes we give too much credit to our feelings based on, or too much credit to our thoughts based on what we're feeling in a given situation. And I mentioned how that becomes a double whammy, where you have a negative feeling and a negative thought working together, and it can be very destructive. We have guilt trip type of thoughts. And this is when we're often motivated to do things, even good things, out of guilt. I have to, I must, I should. And we're doing some good things sometimes, but it's motivated by negative thinking. And then the last ant that we talked about is labeling. And that's when we kind of categorize people and situations, and we put them in a box, and we give them a label, and that's the only way that we now see that person, or the only way that we see ourselves or a particular situation. And so they are labeled that way. So the science of the brain demonstrates that our thoughts matter. Be careful what you think, because your thoughts run your life, God says in His Word. Being an extraordinary person is not measured by your intellect. It's not measured by the contributions that you make to society. It's not measured by even what you accomplish in life. All of that is good. All of that is very positive. These things matter. But being extraordinary really is about how you think. And being an extraordinary person is about how you think. And thinking like Philippians 4, verse 8 type of thoughts is so powerful for us. We've identified 8 things that extraordinary people think like. And they are, very quickly, an extraordinary person is anchored in reality. They think whatever is true. Extraordinary people value others above themselves, whatever is noble. Extraordinary people embody justice and integrity. They think about whatever is right. They have clarity of soul. They think about whatever is pure. Extraordinary people find common ground. They think about whatever is lovely. And I like that one, because that one, the meaning of the word lovely has the idea of moving towards love. And that's what extraordinary people do. Extraordinary people optimistically believe the best. They think about whatever is admirable. They are gracious to a fault. They think about whatever is excellent. And number 8 from Philippians 4:8, extraordinary people celebrate people and life, whatever is praiseworthy. Extraordinary people find something to celebrate. Even if life has been hard, difficult, there's been a lot of negativity, an extraordinary person will dig a little deeper and find something worth celebrating. So the promise today was that we would get a little more practical and look at some of the things that we can do, some steps that we can take to help move towards being a more extraordinary person. So the first couple of weeks, there was more of the meat of the word. This is more of the practical application to it. Practical, though, does not mean easy. And even simple does not mean easy. So some of these steps might be easy, or in the sense of they're simple to say and kind of, yeah, okay, I can do that. But they're going to take some effort on our part to actually put them into play, but well worth it. So let's get practical. Back to the picnic, okay? Kind of recall that little image. Use your imagination here. You got that beautiful scenery set up. You got your picnic blankets spread out and your basket of food. No, everything is just beautiful. You got some nice friends around you. Everything is looking good, feeling good. You're in a kind of a good surrounding there. Suddenly you realize that you've put your picnic blanket down too close to an ant colony. And there's an army of ants that is now invading your otherwise peaceful picnic. What do? What is your reaction to those ants that are coming and marching across your beautiful picnic? And you kind of had that little picture, a little cartoon image in your mind where the ants are lifting up your watermelon and your bucket of chicken, and they're just kind of marching away with your food kind of thing, right? What do you do in a situation like that? Do you just sit there and crush them? Yeah. Do you just sit there and kind of just, eat your picnic and let these ants kind of just come and take half your food away and just kind of monopolize your otherwise beautiful scenery? Probably not. Chances are you're going to want to crush them, right? You're going to want to be proactive and be intentional about stomping out these crazy ants. At the very least, you're going to pack up your picnic and move to a different area, right? Because these ants are invading your otherwise peaceful situation. Well, the same is true for our thoughts. We have these ants, these automatic negative thoughts that threaten an otherwise peaceful day or situation. And these ants come along, these negative thoughts come along, and they threaten to steal and devour our peace, our joy, our productivity, our outlook on things, and they're just there to wreak havoc in our lives. But you know what's so interesting is so often, if it was a real colony of ants invading our picnic, we would stomp them out. But often with our minds, our thoughts, we just let those ants just kind of come and go and steal our joy and wreak havoc in an otherwise fairly peaceful situation. So getting practical, we want to look at ways that we can stomp out these ants. And basically what we're going to do is take Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 kind of thinking that extraordinary people think like, and we're going to put it in practical terms and look at ways that we can stomp out some ants in our lives and prevent them from invading our otherwise peaceful picnic. So here's the first thing that you can do to be proactive and to be preventative against the ants. Number one is to guard yourself against people with ant farms. Okay? Sometimes, and maybe we're all guilty of this from one time or another, we think we can manage and control our thoughts, our negativity, our ants. And so we kind of try to keep them contained and controlled instead of stomping them out. And sometimes people do that to the point of becoming kind of chronically negative. And so everything becomes kind of a negative situation. And they just seem to amp it up. Even if it was a small negativity, suddenly it becomes something so much bigger than it was. We need to guard ourselves against. Now, I'm not saying you have to distance yourself and ignore people that have chronic negativity, but you need to guard yourself against people with ant farms. They're trying to contain and control and manage the ants rather than stomping them out. So whether it's critical thoughts, pessimism, prejudice, that becomes their normal. So negativity sometimes becomes a person's normal. A couple of years ago, working in the trades, talking to a guy, and he said, I'm not prejudiced, I hate everybody equally. And that had become his normal way of thinking. He was saying it to be somewhat funny, but there's some truth in that negative kind of thinking that he was being fair to everybody by loving or by hating everybody equally. That kind of thinking became his normal. And sometimes we do that with negativity. So what we need to do is guard ourselves against that. Now, that's going to look different in different situations, but here's a couple of keys that you can keep in mind. For the ants that are in your own life, you need to put on some big, heavy work boots, and you need to be proactive with stomping them out. So when a negative thought kind of comes, don't give it any ground. If one ant comes to your picnic, chances are there's more ants coming behind. So if you stomp out the one ant or flick that one ant away, get your big boots on, stomp out the first negative thought that comes. And the more you stomp out, the one, the two, the three thoughts, the better you are in the long run. Okay? So sometimes we need to do that very, very intentionally, very proactively for ourselves. Now, you can't put on your big work boots and stomp out other people's ants, right? We need to be gracious and loving and considerate towards other people. So it's not about putting on those big, heavy boots and stomping out other people's negativity. What you need to do with other people's negativity is more in the idea of wearing some ballet shoes, okay? Try to picture yourself in that scenario. Put on some ballet shoes. You need to be gracious and gentle when it comes to other people's ants. But regardless, if it's your ants or other people's ants, you need to guard yourself against ant farms. And sometimes that means coming up with a gentle phrase that you're going to use when someone is being extremely negative. Or maybe you simply just have to kind of just stop them very gently and lovingly say, you know what, that's really negative. Let's look on the bright side here and try to help them. And I know that's easier said than done. But coming up with an intentional strategy, a little phrase, a little something you can say or do to kind of help move that conversation in a better direction. If it's someone that you have a relationship with and you've earned some trust, then you can be a little more direct with them and kind of help them, hold them more accountable to their negativity. One way or the other, it's important to guard ourselves against these ant farms. The Apostle Paul is actually quoting a Greek poet in 1 Corinthians. He says, bad company corrupts good character. And it's so true. So often what happens is the ants in another person's life kind of flow over into ours. And so it's important to be able to guard against that. Second thing that we can do is to improve our people skills. Improve our people skills. You might think, well, what does improving my people skills have to do with stomping out or preventing ants from invading my picnic kind of thing? But here's the way it works. We all impact or are impacted by others in positive and negative ways, right? We all have an impact in positive or negative ways on other people, and other people have an impact on us. That's just the way life is. We're social creatures, social beings. We're made to be that way. And so we have an impact one way or the other. But becoming more sensitive toward others and less sensitive toward ourselves is a really good people skill. Okay? Becoming more sensitive towards what other people are dealing with and going through, and becoming less sensitive to ourselves is a good people skill. Now, that doesn't mean belittling or ignoring our own stuff, but it means that we're being proactive in our interaction with people. So I have an impact on you. And if my impact on you is negative, you can be more thoughtful about how you're receiving that. And so you can focus on what you need to take away or not take away from a situation, but don't get hung up and allow another person's thoughts or negativity or criticisms kind of dictate or determine how you're going to think. So be sensitive towards other people, and less sensitive toward yourself, to the point where it's becoming constructive in your conversations. So if I'm interacting with another person, I want to be sensitive to the impact I'm having on them. I want to think about my thoughts and start to implement some of the Philippians 4:8 kinds of thinking, because many of them are relational types of thoughts. And think about how I'm impacting other people. And then when other people are impacting me, I'm going to be less sensitive. I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm not going to let that criticism or that negativity kind of eat away at me. And I'm less sensitive. I'm not going to take it personal. I'm going to think like an extraordinary person and kind of rise above that. So improving our people skills is a great strategy. Third one is a very simple strategy to say, not always simple to do or easy to do. Improve your diet and physical exercise. Improve your diet and physical exercise. Very basic. An example, a high-carb diet in your life causes fatigue and hinders motivation and clear thinking. I like my bread. I like my carb-type foods, but too many carbs can cause fatigue and hinders motivation. So if I can change something in my diet that's going to help me think better and think more positively, then that's a good thing. Physical exercise is a powerful thing. It takes effort, and you feel the burn, but there's something about physical exercise that creates a better blood flow, and it releases endorphins and increases energy, and it creates positivity as a result of that. When I see the word endorphins, I always want to say indolphins. Totally different. There's nothing relating there. Endorphins. Proper sleep. Anybody here have trouble sleeping? Right? Some people have like real chronic sleep conditions, and and you know how that impacts and affects you. It affects your thinking, it affects your mood in so many different ways. Figuring out a way, even if it means kind of making some major adjustments in your life to be able to get a better night's sleep. It can be a slow climb, but worth looking into. These things are helpful in improving diet and physical exercise and our overall health. When it comes to diet and exercise, it's important to check with your doctor. I'm just a pastor giving you some suggestions and advice. Whatever major changes you make in your life, obviously it's important to check with some professionals in that area. But you'd be amazed at the change it can bring to your life. Number 4, add some pleasant smells to your life, to your situation. So it turns out that aromatherapy is not just a gimmick after all. Who knew? Adding some positive smells, that part of the brain, the limbic system, smells are a part of that. They impact and affect us in various ways. Now here's a piece of good advice as you think about other people. Keep in mind that what you consider a positive smell may not be what another person considers a positive aroma, okay? So it's good to keep that in mind. So if you think tuna fish is a positive smell and that's going to make you feel good, that may not be the case for other people, okay? So you have to be sensitive to that. But there's something about smells, and even in nature, as God has created nature with some beautiful fragrances, it kind of brings a sense of soothing and relaxation. So something simple you can do to add some positivity as well. The next 4 that I want to talk about are ones that I think are so very important as they relate to other people and relationships that we have. Number 5 is create positive memories. Create positive memories. There's something to be said for people that are prone to negativity or certain personality types, if you're like a melancholy personality type, or if you've been through some really rough situations. Sometimes we tend to think about the negative things to an excessive point. In fact, some surveys have been done and showing that, research has been done showing that people with depression and some of those kinds of situations are often prone to have selective memory, so they tend to only focus on, or more dominantly focus on, the negative things that have happened in their lives. And so those major things that happen in life that are very hurtful, harmful, damaging kinds of situations become kind of the biggest picture that people see sometimes. And so we can't erase the past. We can't undo those types of things. They've impacted us. They've really happened. But what we can do is to begin to add more positive situations in our lives. Create new positive memories in your life. They won't replace the negative ones, but what will happen is the more positive things that you create in your life, the more positive memories that you can build, they will begin to outweigh the negative. Not replace them, but outweigh them. And so whether it's with a friend or with your younger children, or even if your children are grown adults, or just a relationship you're in, or if it's just yourself, work at creating more positive memories. What do you do that's fun and exciting, that's going to create a positive memory? How can you add value to your life and your way of thinking by doing something that is creating a positive memory? Something that we do as a family, now that we get together on occasion with our boys, is we play board games. And some of us like to win, and it can be competitive. But the biggest takeaway from just playing board games is just laughing. And the best times that we have playing board games sometimes is just laughing, and sometimes laughing so hard we're crying. That's the big takeaway for me. That's creating a positive memory and walking away feeling really encouraged and good about something. So whatever it takes that you can do to add positive memories is a good thing. Number 6 is very closely related. Develop positive habits and hobbies in your life. So very similar to creating positive memories, we need to look for ways to create positive habits and positive hobbies. Whatever those are, they're different for different people, and they might be different for different times of life and seasons of life, but find something that you enjoy doing. What really gets you excited and juiced up and makes you feel like, you've just done something so positive and incredible. Do that on a regular basis. Find ways to add these hobbies, these habits to your life, whatever they are. It's amazing that we can be creative and productive and doing something that's rewarding, how much it boosts our spirits and helps us feel more productive. Getting out and serving. I was just talking to someone earlier today that they have a friend that loves to volunteer. What a beautiful way to do something fruitful, rewarding, positive, and helping other people at the same time. And it just does something for us. And I think we were created that way, to be people who are interacting with others and doing positive, creative things for other people as well. So whatever you need to do to find those hobbies and habits to add value, to add positivity to your life. Invite another person in. Do you like to go for walks, bike rides, play games? Whatever it is, do those things. Sometimes you might have to force yourself out to do that. You might have to force yourself to do something you don't feel like doing, but you will benefit from it. And if it's social, it's all the more beneficial because we can rub off on one another. Number 7, important to surround ourselves with extraordinary people. This whole series has been about what extraordinary people think and becoming the type of person that thinks in extraordinary ways. And the thoughts that we looked at from Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, as you are becoming that type of person, surround yourself with other people who are doing the same. Iron sharpens iron is the idea, that you surround yourself with people who are going to encourage and speak life into you. And sometimes in a healthy relationship, you are that for the other person in your relationship. Parents ought to be that for their kids. Sometimes you might have to go looking for that. Maybe it's not right in front of you. Maybe you need to go looking for that other person who's going to speak life into you. So if you find yourself, kind of dwelling on the negative or feeling down or whatever, be intentional. Step out and kind of out of the comfort zone a little bit and find that other person, that one or two people that are going to come alongside you and are going to speak life into you in extraordinary ways. And then the last one, although I'm sure there are many others, is to cultivate a healthy spiritual life. Cultivate a healthy spiritual life. Reading God's word, praying, listening to worship music or worshiping, going to church. These things are not meant to be legalistic obligations. None of these things that we do in our devotion to God are meant to be legalistic. They're not meant to be a burden. They're meant to be life-giving. And so we do these things to cultivate health in our lives. It's a healthy expression of our love and devotion to God and to the family of God and to the world that God has put us in. And so don't get caught up in having to do these things with the guilt trip mentality, right? I have to go to church. I have to pray. I have to read my Bible. No, you don't have to do those things. You want to do those things as an expression of love and devotion to God. You want those things to just kind of flow and be life-giving. There's a lot to be said for discipline. There's times that we do things we don't feel like doing. We're not driven by what we feel, right? But it's not about being driven by guilt and condemnation. We just need to do the right, the healthy, the good thing out of an overflow of what God has been doing in and around us. So make sure you're cultivating a healthy spiritual life. Do you have a routine devotional time? Not because you have to, not because you should, but because it's healthy and good. Do you make an effort to have that consistent kind of regular time where you're focusing on your spiritual health. Very important. And maybe you can rub off on someone else. Maybe you can get together with another person and be an influence to another person, or vice versa. So these are some of the practical things that you can do. And you'll have to kind of sit down maybe and work out exactly what that might look like for you in your situation. But use some of these things to help you focus on what it means to be that extraordinary person and thinking like Philippians 4:8. So I want to cap this off and kind of conclude this series with a couple of thoughts that are really for the Christian, okay? So for the follower of Jesus here today. So if you're not a follower of Jesus, this is kind of optional information that I'm going to tack on here, and you can just bear with me for the next couple of minutes. But for those who are followers of Christ and you're striving in your faith journey to pursue him more and become that extraordinary person, I want to leave you with a couple of extra thoughts on what that might look like. So back to a little bit more of the meat here again, okay? The Apostle Paul makes this statement in another one of his letters. And much of the New Testament is about these letters that Paul wrote to various people or churches. And in a letter to Timothy, which was a co-worker of his, he makes this statement that he's teaching Timothy to be careful, to kind of warn him against false teachers and imposters of Christianity. And so the content of this particular verse in this passage is a little on the heavy side. It's a little harsh, a little hard-hitting. But I don't want you to get hung up on the weight of the passage. I want you to catch what is some really good advice about being extraordinary and thinking extraordinarily. So his statement is found in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 5. And this is what Paul says. He says that there are certain people who have a form of godliness but deny its power. They have a form of godliness, but they deny its power. Now, in this passage, the form that it's talking about, and the idea of the form of something is kind of the outline, the framework of something. It's kind of the outward appearance of something. So Paul is saying that there are people who have this outward appearance of godliness. They have the framework. They kind of have what it looks like on the outside, but they deny its power. Or in other words, they're empty and void on the inside. They have what it looks like on the outside, but it's just a shell. It's just an outline. They're kind of missing the essence of it on the inside. Extraordinary people, extraordinary followers of Jesus are people of substance and character. To be an extraordinary follower of Jesus means that you have substance and character. In other words, you don't just have the framework of godliness, you have the essence of godliness. So the question is, what is the essence of godliness? What does that mean? What does that look like in our lives? What is the essence of godliness? Paul answers this question in the couple of verses prior to the one that I just read. But it's so easy to miss what the essence of godliness is and what Paul is getting at because the verse itself is kind of weighty and heavy. So I'm going to read the verses for you. Here's what I want you to do. Don't get hung up on the weight and the harshness of the verses. And I want you to watch for the ways and the number of times that the word love is used. Okay, in these couple of verses. So here's in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. Note the number of ways and times that the word love shows up. Paul says, "But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God." And then he says, "having a form of godliness, but denying its power." Did you count how many times the word love or some version of it shows up? Yeah, 6 times in just 3 verses, Paul refers to love or some version of love. To me, that says a lot. That says something very, very important that we often skip over because, like I said, the passage itself is kind of weighty and heavy. But this idea of the importance and the value of love in the right direction stands out here when we really see it, when we really kind of stop and take a look at it. Usually when we think about God's power, we think about God's strength, his might, his ability, his miracle-working power, typically speaking. And it certainly is all of that. The word power in this passage is dunamis. We get the word dynamite from it. You probably heard that before, right? So God's power definitely has might, strength, that kind of power to it. It has an ability to do something miraculous. There's no question, no doubt about that. But if that's all God's power was, God would be no different than any other being or person that just uses their power in random, even destructive sort of ways. There's something more to God's power than just the fact that it's got some kind of force to it. There's something more that needs to be in place in order for God's power to have a greater sense of impact and quality as God. Satan has a measure of power. We have a measure of power, but power alone isn't enough to make us extraordinary people. Just having power, authority, that doesn't make us extraordinary. It doesn't make God extraordinary. God could be all-powerful, but unless he has love, he's not extraordinary. He's all-powerful, but it's not his power that really makes him extraordinary. It's that his power, the essence of who he is about love. Scripture says that God is love. One of the main defining characteristics of who God is and what God is like is his love, not his power. And when God does something in power, it's done out of love. When God does anything he does, it's motivated by his love, because that's the defining characteristic of who God is. God is love. And so everything he does is out of love. So the essence of godliness, the essence of God's power, the essence of who God is really about love. Love. He is an extraordinary God because of his love and what he does out of love. The essence of godliness, then, for us as followers of Jesus is also love. That's to be the essence at the core of who we are and what we do. See, we can have the framework of looking like a Christian. We can have the outward appearance. We can talk the talk, but at the core of who we are is really what counts. Being an extraordinary follower of Jesus is about love. These 8 phrases that we looked at from Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, 6 out of 8 are all about love. And a case could be made that all 8 of them are about love. They're about how we interact with other people, how we treat others. So check it out again. Extraordinary people value others above themselves. They think about whatever's noble. Extraordinary people embody justice and integrity. They think about whatever is right. Extraordinary people find common ground. They think about whatever is lovely, moving toward love. Extraordinary people optimistically believe the best, not just for themselves, but for other people. Extraordinary people are gracious to a fault. They think about whatever is excellent. And extraordinary people celebrate people and life. They think about whatever is praiseworthy. Extraordinary people, at the core of who they are, the essence of who they are, what makes them truly extraordinary is love, and how that love overflows to other people. That's the kind of God that we serve is, and that's who we are in his image. We are extraordinary, not just based on what we think, but based on the love of God that is in us and working through us. A couple of verses that Paul uses the word form, and again in 2 Timothy 3:5, a form of godliness, denying its power. In Philippians 2:6, Jesus is in very form or nature God. In that verse, it's a little bit of a different idea because Paul is saying that Jesus is God. And in Romans 12, we'll conclude with this one. He uses a similar word again. He says, be transformed. How? By the renewing of your mind, right? Your thoughts matter. Your thoughts are powerful and effective and influential. And when you think like an extraordinary person, you are thinking like a person of love. And that will overflow and impact the people around you in such profound and powerful ways, even if it means you have to address some of the ants in another person's life because you've built up a relationship of love with that person, and you can speak into that person's life out of the love that you have for them. That's what God is like, and that's what he calls us to be like as extraordinary people. Let's pray. God, your word is rich and powerful because it is about you, and it's about how you interact with us. It's about what you call us to. And so we thank you for it. But Lord, your word alone, just as we read it, it lacks the punch unless your Spirit takes it and helps it to really find its place in our hearts and minds. So, Lord, we take it as good advice, sound, solid advice, and we can apply it, and it can be beneficial. But, Lord, we know as followers of Jesus that there's another step beyond that, where your Holy Spirit makes it living and active in us. So, Lord, I pray that it would certainly be good advice for us to follow your word. But I also pray that your Spirit would help us to take it and allow you to really work it into the core of who we are, and that we would be transformed by the renewing of our minds as we begin to think more like Christ, as we begin to interact with others the way Jesus did, that we would begin to see ourselves, to see others, to see the mission that you have us on in ways that Jesus did and saw. I pray, Lord, that you would just continue to work in us. May we be encouraged and built up in our faith in this journey that we're on. And wherever we find ourselves, if we're at a place where we haven't exactly even taken that first step of following Jesus, but we're asking the question, we're wondering about it, God, I pray that your Spirit would just kind of give a little nudge toward the answer for those people. For those who have been on the journey a while, maybe they're struggling with situations in life, I pray that your Spirit would just give them the courage and the faith and the hope that they need. And for those, Lord, who are doing fairly well, I pray, God, that they would just come alongside others and just be that source of love and encouragement and hope for another person. And together, Lord, we all just journey together and follow your example. Thank you for it. We bless your name, your faithfulness to us, and help us, Lord, to be a blessing to others. Amen.